Hi everyone, and welcome to Deep Geek Live. This is another Q&A session. It's just me. I promise we are going to get the guests back again from next week, but I've been really enjoying actually just doing these Q&A videos where we get the chance just to answer as many different questions on whatever that come up. I've got a load of questions from my patrons. I've got some also that came through on Facebook and Twitter. If you want to follow me on there, then just go and have a look for Deep Geek. And obviously, if there's any super chats, we'll pick those up, and I'll try and get to as many questions just that come up in the chat as possible. So, guys, I want to just get straight into it. There are a lot of fantastic people I've already seen in the chat, and we've had some super chats. I just want to say thank you to Kerry McDonald. Thank you so much, saying just because I love you and your channel. That's very kind. Thank you. And what else? Maura Lee, thank you so much. $15, that's very generous. Thank you. No questions, just enjoy your Q&A live streams and being able to participate in the chat. And then House Kraken Tacos, $10. Thank you so much. This is probably a good one to start off with, actually. Just saying, if you could be involved in any part of this story, where would you like to be? I have to say the area that right now I am most fascinated by is Bravos. I just think that there is so much there that we just do not understand yet. There's the Iron Bank. There's what's going on with the Sea Lord. If you saw my recent video about Dany's past, then you'll know that I'm pretty sure she was tied in with what was going on with a great plot going on there with the Sea Lord. There's obviously the Faceless Men as well. So there's huge amounts of politics going on there, and it's this incredibly detailed city. I would just love to just get involved in there and just see what's going on and understand it, because I think that we understand a lot of what's going on in Westeros, but less about what's going on in Essos. So that is probably where I would most want to go to. Stephen Stark, thank you very much for your super chat. Just presumably wanting me to say howdy y'all, which I know I do not say very well, but thank you very much, very kind. Guys, I also wanted to say thank you for a super chat I missed last week. I really hate it when this happens, because the whole point about super chats is that they should flash up, but sometimes when I'm just doing these solo, I miss one of them, so I'm really sorry about that. But Carlo, Iron Addict, who was saying new sub, love your attention to detail, keep it up. Thank you very much for your super chat from last time. So, guys, I'm going to go into a whole series of questions first, if it's okay, that my patrons were asking a lot of questions about what was going on in the books up at Winterfell and the things that are going on around there. So I'm going to dive into a few of those connected with the Northern Conspiracy and things like that. But Christy Miller, thank you very much for your super chat. Are you going to do a travel guide for Essos? Yes, I am. Once I've finished working my way through Westeros, I'm going to work all the way down from where we're in the Westlands now. We need to move across Dawn as well, into the Stormlands, and obviously Dragonstone and a few of those other places just off the coast. So I'll be doing that. After that, yes, we're going to be going over to Essos. So that's probably a few months away, but maybe sometime in the new year we'll get there. Cathy Stark, thank you very much. This was from Patreon. Cathy says, who knows that the fake Arya is Jane Poole, and how might they use that knowledge? So this, as I say, this is very much a book question. So in the books, Ramsay Bolton was not married to Sansa. He got married to somebody called Jane Poole, but they pretended that she was actually Arya, because Arya disappeared. As far as everybody in Westeros is concerned, she disappeared from the face of the earth from leaving King's Landing. So they've got Ramsay married to this person called Jane Poole, who they are pretending is Arya to try and boost their claim to Winterfell. Now, in terms of who knows that, there are two sets of people who knows that this is not actually Arya. Two sets of people: the people who are actually involved in coming up with this plan, which is Roose and Ramsay, maybe a couple of other people around there, and there are people who know what Arya looks like, who know her well. Now, of course, this is a few years have passed and she was young, so passing acquaintances could probably be mistaken for, or they could be forgiven for not knowing that that's who it really is. But people like Theon, for example, Theon knows that this isn't Arya, and that is the fundamental point here, is that the people who will know, and at the moment it's really just Theon, but there will be others, because where Jane escaped with Theon from Winterfell in the pre-release chapter from the Winds of Winter, then Stannis then is sending her up to Jon Snow at the Wall. When she gets up there, then Jon, obviously he's just been killed, but we're going to assume he's going to come back. Jon will know that that's not her, and the moment he does, then I think that then opens it up to everybody really understanding this was actually a completely made up thing. So what will they do with that information? I think that they will just let people know. I think that they will let people know that this is the Boltons making up a thing in order to try and validate their claim to Winterfell. So I think it's probably in people's best interests for that just to be general knowledge. Now, building on that, we've got Brennan Barnes. Hi there, Brennan. Just saying, could he get my thoughts on Stannis in terms of he's seeing him as an equivalent of Javert, character from Les Miserables, who is a righteous man who would break before he bends. Now, so you're saying here that you'd love to see him survive until the end of the books and deal with the consequences of his actions. And what are my thoughts on his character trajectory? I think that I find, as many people do, I find Stannis a fascinating character because he's actually doing what he's doing out of a sense of duty. It's not out of all of these characters who are trying to get the Iron Throne. It's not that he particularly wants it. He didn't grow up thinking that he wanted to be king. He went to war because he felt that he was the rightful king, and therefore he ought to do what the king ought to do. So he is very much about doing his duty. And I think that probably in the books there will be the equivalent, it might not be the exact same circumstances, but the equivalent of the sacrifice of Shireen. And I think that eventually, yes, he's going to be pushed more and more to becoming a person that he thinks is not a good king. I think he probably will still die. I don't think that he will survive, because I think that he, as a character, is just too much wrapped up in this pursuit of the Iron Throne. And in the books, we're increasingly moving away from what's going on with the Iron Throne to what are the bigger threats happening to the kingdom. So I don't think that he's going to survive all the way through to the end. I think he will die. I think he probably will die in and around a battle for Winterfell, rather than in trying to defend against the others, or the White Walkers. But I think he's a fascinating character, and I think that this we will see him start to question himself just a very little bit towards the end, is my view of where his character journey might be going. Nyanor, €5. Thank you so much. First super chat ever goes to you, Robert. Thank you. That's really kind. Not very much, but with all my support from France. Great channel. Thank you so much. That's really kind of you. Thank you. I do appreciate that. We're sticking with this same idea about what's happening up in Winterfell in the books. And Susan Dunkel, again a patron, was asking, who is the Ghost of Winterfell? The Spearwives say it is not them or Abel. Who is it then? So the situation in the books with Winterfell is that the Boltons hold Winterfell, but the winter has really come, and it's started to freeze them, literally freeze them into the castle. All but one of the gates are frozen shut. But within it, what has happened is that there's been this whole series of suspicious murders, and it is the talk is of this being the Ghost of Winterfell, and there's a chapter which is a Theon perspective chapter called the Ghost of Winterfell. So on one level, we have to say, because the point of view chapters are named after that person, Theon is the Ghost of Winterfell himself, but I think that's more a metaphorical thing, that he's just a ghost of his former self. I think that's what that's trying to say. In terms of who has been committing these murders, I think it is the Spearwives and Abel. I think that is exactly what they're doing. I think so. Abel is Mance Rayder, who has been sent in by Melisandre Stannis to effectively cause problems within the castle, because there's a big battle brewing. Stannis is waiting not that far away with his army, and they're just wanting to sow the seeds of discord within Winterfell. So that's what's going on there, and I think that when they're denying it, the Spearwives, I'd have to go back and read the exact text, but I think they're merely saying that the most recent murder wasn't them, which shows that there's a lot going on in Winterfell. Now, when I say there's a lot going on in Winterfell, there as well as being this plot that Melisandre Stannis have come up with to try and sow these seeds of discord, there's also another plot, probably independent, but they might be starting to understand each other soon, with Waymon Manderly and House Manderly, who remember and are actually secretly loyal to the Starks, but they are pretending to be supportive of Stannis. So there's a whole load of business going on there. So I think they are also trying to push the Boltons' army and camp in a way to make it less of a cohesive unit. And it's not a very cohesive unit. There are Freys up there as well who are just all over the place. The northern houses may have signed up to the Boltons, those that are there, but that doesn't mean that they all love the Boltons. So there's a huge amount of conflict going on there. The Spearwives are, I think, behind most of those murders, deaths, suspicious deaths, but that doesn't mean it's all of them. I think there's a lot going on there. So I hope, Susan, that one answers that. Nick Oswald says, what is going on with Abel, in your opinion? If Mance wrote the pink letter, where is he now, and what will his role be in the Winds of Winter? The pink letter is a letter which purports to come from Ramsay. We saw it on the show. They didn't make a big deal of it, but it was there, that goes to Jon Snow and basically just hurls abuse at him and tries to incite him to come to Winterfell, to attack Winterfell. Now, there's a lot there with the pink letter that suggests it probably isn't Ramsay who sent it. It doesn't have the official stamp of House Bolton. The language has a lot of stuff in there that seems to be quite wildling-ish, rather than the kind of things that Ramsay Bolton would say. It's just got a lot of the kinds of things that somebody who is pretending to be Ramsay would say, if that makes sense. So I think what Abel Mance is doing is actually part of this big plan. Stannis clearly wants to retake Winterfell, and he wants to install Jon Snow as the Lord of Winterfell. That's what he was wanting. That's what he offered him the job to legitimize him, so that he could then become the Lord of Winterfell. And Jon didn't want to do that. He wanted to stay at the Night's Watch. But I think that it's still what Stannis is about, and so he's got this plan to try and incite Jon to come and get Winterfell. And by sending what he thinks is Arya up to Jon, then he's also saying, okay, so your sister is also now out. Therefore, there's nothing to hold you back. You can go and attack Winterfell, and you can go and retake it without fear that your sister might die in that conflict. So that there's a huge plan going on there. Mance, as well as having a debt effectively to Melisandre, he knows about the threat from the north. He knows about the others. He wanted to get all of the wildlings south of the wall because he wanted to protect them. But he also, I think, he realizes that the best way to protect all of humanity is for the North to be united, and that is only going to happen when the Starks are back in Winterfell. So that, I think, is his game. I think he's happily going along with what Melisandre and Stannis are wanting, because that's all part of his plan as well. But yes, I think that his aim is to get a united North with the Starks back in Winterfell. Mark Bryan saying, again, this is from Patreon, saying, it's written many times that there must always be a Stark in Winterfell. With the sacking of the castle and it being set on fire, then rehabilitated with the Boltons, do you think that this will have any consequence on future storylines? So, pardon me. Yes. Now, I think there are two elements here to the there must always be a Stark in Winterfell. I think one of them we have certainly seen since the Starks have gone. Then Winterfell has been hit. It seems to be the epicenter of winter. It's the snows there are 30 feet, 40 feet high around it, as we saw that the castle gates have been frozen shut. The language used there is incredibly visceral, and it's different to how it's used even when we're at the wall. It doesn't seem quite that bad, and Winterfell's a lot further south than the wall. So there does seem to be something going on there. Some sort of magic has been broken or unleashed as a result of that. But I think that the second thing with the Starks, there must always be a Stark in Winterfell, is connected to the Winterfell crypts. And I think it's about making sure that the Starks are always being buried there generation after generation after generation. So what we have down there is effectively an army of dead Starks. Now, I did a video quite a while ago now about the Horn of Winter and the crypts of Winterfell. And I think that this is just something which has been established to try and make sure that the Starks remained there over the millennia to build that army of dead Starks, who I think in the books, not the show I suspect, but in the books will be released. So that's what I think is going on with the Starks always being in Winterfell, needing to be in Winterfell. And I think that there's a very clear... Oh, actually, I should probably say the bit I don't know, because I haven't thought it through and I don't know whether we can know yet, is what happens when the Starks return to Winterfell. Does this suddenly make winter that seems to have descended specifically on Winterfell, does that make that go away? It's going to recede? Is it going to stay there now it's there? We simply do not know. So that, I think, is a really fascinating subject. And does Jon count as a Stark if he is the one who gets back there? Again, we don't know. The implication of his dreams of when he's in the crypts and the dead Starks who were there in his dreams say, this is not your place, this isn't for you, implies that he's not counted as being a Stark in terms of the sort of the magic of old Winterfell. Tommy B, £10. Thank you very much. That's very kind. What did you think of Nymeria leading a super pack of wolves? Is this an allusion to direwolf power, Stark power of leading the North and warging? I think it's many things. I think it's, first of all, it's just what you would expect Nymeria to do. I think it's just a natural progression of the wolf's character to grow up. It will want to be in pack, and there are no other direwolves around there, so the pack will be normal wolves. And yes, this is the biggest and toughest wolf out there, so it will be leader of a massive wolf pack. So I think there's, on one level, this is just natural what is following on from that. I think when you're talking about allusions to direwolf power and the Stark's power of leading the North, I think that there definitely is something going on there. I think that it's the allusion to the Starks having to be together is probably the most important one here, because we saw it a lot in season 7 when you get that line that they're all remembering from Ned Stark about the lone wolf dying and the pack surviving. That is very much the kind of the impression. At the moment the Starks are scattered, when they come back together, that's when they're strong. So that, I think, is certainly one thing, that there's a kind of an illusion going on there. And in terms of warging, yes, in the books, Arya still has a link and a bond across to Nymeria, and through that to the other direwolves that are around. So they are still pack. It's just they're spread out a long way. The Laughing Storm Born Again, thank you so much for your super chat. What part do you think Lady Stoneheart will play in the books to come? Wish the TV series would show so much more. Yeah, it was a shame that Lady Stoneheart wasn't there. In the books, I think that her role is going to be partly what Arya's has on the show, because Arya came back and she was this avenging Stark angel, if you like, who was killing off people, most notably the Freys, who wronged the Starks, even if they weren't actually on her list. So all of those Freys, she didn't, when she was reciting her prayer, she didn't say, and all of House Frey. That wasn't on her list. So I think that is actually probably something that we may find Lady Stoneheart doing, is taking on that vengeance role herself. Now, I could see that as she is sort of wandering around the centre of Westeros in the Riverlands, I think that she may well end up at the Twins and do something akin to what Arya did. It was a lot easier on the show for Arya to be doing that kind of thing, because obviously they don't have the Lady Stoneheart character. The thing for me that I'm really looking forward to is the point at which she actually, and I think she actually meets one of her children. Because what seems to be driving her as a character is this great vengeance, because she thinks effectively her family in its entirety has gone, and so all she's got left is this burning hatred. That's all that's there. I think the thing that will happen is that she will meet one of her children, and I think that will then not so much get rid of her reason for living or unliving or whatever it is that you would say, but I think that's the critical moment at which we see her, when she will perhaps be willing to let herself go, if that's the right words, because that's the point at which she will realize that actually the thing that was driving her isn't true. Stephen Stark, $5. Why is Joffrey the greatest king in history? Be specific. Thank you for that, Stephen. That was very kind. Shall I try and play this game? Why is Joffrey the greatest king in history? Because he had he had as hand of the king two of the finest hands of the king that there had been, being Tyrion and Tywin Lannister. And when I say finest, I mean most efficient and most effective. And despite all of his Joffreyness, he actually allowed the running of the realm to be done by people who knew how to do business. So obviously, I don't agree with the premise of this question, but if I were to argue the case, I would say he is, because he took a step back, recognizing his own lack of interest in or ability in the nitty-gritty of how to run a kingdom and how to win a war effectively. So there you go. Please don't give me questions like that. Joffrey was not a good king. Joffrey was a horrible, horrible little boy. Higa Herga, thank you so much. Looking forward to a huge dead versus undead conflict and the crypts empty. Yes, so the crypts empty for this, again, going back to that video I was talking about a few moments ago about the crypts of Winterfell. I think that the crypts will, when the Horn of Winter is blown, I think that the crypts will empty and the dead Starks will rise to fight the battle. Now, what this, the battle against the others, what I think this means, this is just in the books, not on the show. I'm almost certain they're not going to go down this route on the show because they've not talked about the Horn of Winter. They've not really majored on anybody else within in the crypts other than the statues of the characters that we know their names of. But what this means is that suddenly we're not actually going to have what they've been sort of talking about on the show, which is the battle of the army of the dead against the army of the living. What we're actually going to have is something way more complicated than that in the books. We've got the others who are not undead. They are an other form of life. They have got the whites, who are, of course, they are the army of the dead, but on facing them will be dead Starks, as well as lots of living people and lots of people who perhaps have also been brought back, people like Jon, for example, and there are others. Lady Stoneheart is around, and down south, I can certainly see a situation where you might get Qyburn creating not just one animated zombie mountain, but also perhaps an army of them. Once he's understood the principle of how to do this, what's stopping him doing it many times over? I don't think much is. So we're not facing a battle of the living against the dead. We're facing a much, much more complicated story than that. And that, I think, ties into George R.R. Martin's feel about war. It is not about the goodies against the baddies. It's about everybody losing. This is a fundamental belief that he has that I think is showing through again and again as we read through A Song of Ice and Fire. And I think in the final battles, that will become even more clear. Sheeny Donut, 5 Canadian dollars, I think that is. Stannis Baratheon Night Lamp Theory predictions. Right, so this, for those who are unaware of it, is a theory on how Stannis is going to win the Battle of Winterfell. So on the show, obviously, we had that there was first of all, there was a battle between the Boltons and Stannis' army, and Stannis loses. And then you get the Starks and ultimately Littlefinger and the Knights of the Vale come in and they win. But this theory goes that Stannis has got a master plan to win the battle by drawing out the Boltons and that army. He's already drawn out a few of them, incidentally, and through having a night lamp, it's been a little bit since I've read the theory in detail, but it's basically trying to pretend where different armies are and therefore ambush the Boltons. Now, my prediction is that this is not going to be as simple as that, because when George R.R. Martin has been talking about the Winds of Winter, he's emphasized a lot that this is going to be quite complicated. I've already talked about there being a complicated situation within Winterfell. I do not think Stannis truly understands everything that's going on there. There are plots and counterplots going on. I'm not sure that the Manderleys are completely seeing eye to eye with Stannis. I don't think that is all tied up. I think that he's partly hoping that Jon is going to come with the Night's Watch down, and yet Jon is obviously just being killed. So I think that there's a lot of other things going on that we just do not know about. So I like the theory that this is his plan, but I don't think that necessarily means that everything is going to go according to the plan. I think Stannis probably will win, or at the very least damage the Bolton army enough that when the follow-up comes, and I think there probably will be some sort of a follow-up from Jon and co with the Grand Northern Conspiracy, who will start to rally around him if they discover that he has an interest in coming or back away from the wall. Then that, I think, is then going to be the point at which Winterfell is retaken for House Stark. So Night Lamp theory, I like it as a plan. I don't think that the plan will work perfectly. No plan works perfectly in war. But thank you for that super chat. That's very kind. And Nathan Jachara, apologies for probably butchering your name there, but I have a possible theory, but relies on this. Is there any evidence of wargs in Essos, I think, especially during when Dragonbinder could have been used? This is a good question. There's not. Well, there's a lot more evidence of warging in Westeros because we know a lot more in Westeros, and this was very much a first man thing. The first man came from Essos, so actually then a lot of the people there will potentially be the same kinds of people. There's been a lot of mixing and all the rest of it. I'm trying to think, and I can't immediately off the top of my head, trying to think of an example of a clear warg over in Essos. I think the answer is that there could be, but I don't think we've seen them. Now, in terms of Dragonbinder is about... And incidentally, guys, I always say there are people far more knowledgeable than me always in the chat. So if you can think of any wargs in Essos, do pop it in the chat because I'll be fascinated. I've got something in the back of my mind that I can't quite remember. But in terms of Dragonbinder is a way for the old Valyrians, or the magic horns that they used for the old Valyrians to control their dragons. We shouldn't take as a given that if somebody bonds with the dragon immediately does what they want, and all the rest of it. It's been very clear with Dany that she doesn't control Drogon completely. Drogon does what Drogon wants, and if Dany wants to fly somewhere and Drogon feels like it, then that's what's going to happen. But in old Valyria, they used these magical horns to actually control and force dragons to do what they want. Now, this complete tangent, guys, so apologies for this, but this does make me think of the extract from Fire and Blood that we recently had from George R.R. Martin when he was talking there of Good Queen Alysanne, who went up to the wall and got onto her dragon Silverwing and tried to fly across the wall, north of the wall, but the dragon wouldn't go. Now, it's not clear whether this was because the dragon couldn't pass the wall or because the dragon didn't want to pass the wall. But what it is clear is the fact that we have another instance there of a dragon rider who could not control their dragon completely, even though they were bonded and got on, as far as we can tell, really well. That was showing that the principle was still there. So Dragonbinder is not about warging, it's about control. So I hope that one answers that. I'm just having a very quick flick through to see whether anyone has got any examples of warging in Essos. I can't immediately see it in the chat, but I'll get on to LJS Lucas, £5. Thank you very much. Do you think the Shadowlands, Ulthos and Sothorios, I can never pronounce that, that's the continent down south, are important to the magic in the world or the odd seasons? Do you think George R. R. Martin has plans for them? I don't think he has plans for them appearing in novels. I promise you never tell him, but I'm starting to believe LML a lot more about the you can tell him it's fine, he's a good man, about the derivation of magic being from above. Now, it does seem to be that when the red comet goes by, that seems to be important magically, quite significant magically, and there seem to be lots of things that seem to have come from above, from the sky. We get, for example, Dawn, the sword from House Dane. That is from a meteorite. And that is clearly very symbolic and quite magical. So that is there. And then you get that kind of oily black stone that is dotted around in various places. That also seems to be not of Planetos. It seems to have been sort of come from somewhere else in some way. So my take is that those other lands are important in understanding that this is a bigger world. And there's a lot of stuff going on there. It will be mentioned in passing, I think, with Victarion sent some of his fleet off down there, and they haven't returned. So I think it's just a showing that there's a huge amount of other stuff out there that we don't know. But in terms of magic, no, I think that's a lot more celestial. Okay, guys, I'm going to just very briefly, as I always do, let you know what's coming up on the channel. So we've got the Traveller's Guide is moving on. I was talking about it a little bit ago. We're at Casterly Rock this week. So tomorrow we're going to be at Casterly Rock. My next video in my series on working through Robert's Rebellion and so is turning into another one of those epic ones, guys. I'm going to try and get it out for this weekend. I can't promise it, but it's another one of these half-hour-long ones at least, I would have thought. It's looking at the whole last bit of this, and this is when the Lannisters come in. How the Lannisters are very important. What happens with the sack of King's Landing? So much happens there that's actually has huge implications for the story of A Song of Ice and Fire. What then Ned does, where he heads off, where he then goes off down to Storm's End, what happens there, and then fundamentally how and why he might have known to go off to the Tower of Joy after that, and why he decided to take those the people with him that he did. Not sure how much of all of that I'm going to cram into one video, but I'm going to try and get as much of that into there as possible. After that, if you're interested, I've got another one that I want to look at. What were Rhaegar and Lyanna actually up to? We don't really think about it, but they were disappeared for a long time. And yes, they were making babies, but what else? Is that really all it was? Rhaegar was very focused in on prophecy. Was he literally just there not doing anything for all that time? So I want to do a video on that, and then obviously get onto the Tower of Joy after that. So Tower of Joy is probably going to be in a 3 weeks or so time. So that's what's happening there. I've got patrons. I always thank my patrons, because guys, I cannot do this without you. Thank you so much. This is it means so much to me when people support me through Patreon, and so I just wanted to say thank you. If you are interested in supporting the channel, getting access to some extra stuff that I do over there, then please do check out the link. I'm sure, I think Chrissy Volstones, thank you very much for being a fantastic mod today. I'm sure we'll be able to put the link in there. Oh, we've already put the Patreon one in there. Thank you, that's really kind. Do go and check that one out. There's a link also down in the description. The other thing I would say, if you've not yet checked out my second channel, please do. If you're at all interested in audio narration, I'm reading my way through what I consider to be the classics of science fiction and fantasy. We did The War of the Worlds. We're now working our way through Frankenstein. We're about halfway through Frankenstein, just a little bit under halfway through Frankenstein. And then I've got some great things lined up for after that. I'm going to be talking to my patrons over there on The Well Told Tale, just to decide what we're going to do next after we finish Frankenstein. But I'm thinking maybe a shorter one, and then get back into one of the great novels again. So that's it. That's what's happening. That's what's coming up on the channel. Got a few more questions I want to get into from my patrons, and then also see what else we've got coming up in the chat. So where have we got to on this? So Fred Versteeg became a patron today. I saw that, Fred. Welcome, and thank you very much. I've already given my little spiel, but it really does mean a lot to me. Thank you so much. My first question. In the books, Cersei is told that she will be killed by the younger brother, Valonqar. If she gets pregnant in the books as well, assuming she really is pregnant on the TV show, might she, just as her mother, die at childbirth, the younger brother being the third son she has? Yeah, I've heard this theory before. I quite like it, but in the books, I don't think necessarily they'll do the same on the show, but in the books, quite a big deal has been made of Jaime and Cersei, where they both say on multiple occasions, we came into this world together, we're going to leave this world together. I think that, to me, seems like a logical character arc. And for the two of them, and for Jaime to be at the point where when we first see him, he is so obsessed with her, the things I do for love, when he's pushing Bran out of the window, to get around to the point where, and he's getting there in the books, where he actually not only does not love her anymore, but recognizes the evil that she does, and wants to kill her, in a mirror of what he was, of when he killed the Mad King. That, for me, feels the most satisfying character arc for him. So I like this idea. The Valonqar is deliberately vague in terms of language. Now, it could be a younger brother, could be a younger sibling. We don't know. So yes, I think it's possible, but personally, I think in the books it's going to be Jaime who ends up killing Cersei. I've got another super chat, $25. I think that was Maura Lee, but it says message retracted. If that was you, Maura, thank you so much. That's incredibly kind. But it might just be my system not picking up on that one. Kid28 wants to know what my thoughts are on a Talking Thrones video. Now, I saw the link. I had a quick look at it. Talking Thrones, I do enjoy Talking Thrones videos, by the way. I know I don't like spoilers, so I tend not to do the spoiler ones, but he does do quite a few other non-spoilery videos, and this was one of the more speculative ones. And this one was an idea about the Night King being able to access the Weirwood network. And as a result, he's been watching the Starks all along. So my reflection on that is that there is certainly, so the Night King is obviously just a show character at the moment. We may be introduced to some equivalent character in the books, but he's just a show character. I think that it's very clear, though, that the Night King has got greenseer warging abilities of some kind. And what seemed to have happened is that when the Children of the Forest created him, Then they gave him this sort of other type of life, which is a sort of a mirror of the Green Seer powers. So in the same way that you get Bran, for example, can go into the body of a living human or a living wolf or anything like that, he can, and control them. He can control the dead. So it's a kind of a mirror of that, and he's got the same kind of powers. He obviously knew when Bran was warging into those ravens, crows, whatever they were at the end of the last season, and he stopped that. And he obviously was waiting for Bran when Bran went and saw him just before there was that big raid on the Blood Raven's cave. So he clearly has the same kind of powers. In terms of, does this mean that he's been spying on them through the weirwood tree? Quite possibly, although I don't think it's through a weirwood tree. I don't think he's hooking himself up to a weirwood tree and doing it. I think he's got the powers that there's this kind of throwaway line in the books from Bloodraven when he's talking to Bran and he says, first of all, the Green Seer can see through the eyes of the weirwood trees, but after that can travel further. And I think that the Night King has been around for so long and is so powerful that he can do that traveling further thing. I don't think he needs to access via the weirwood net. I think he's got the magic. Where was I going? That I'm just going to quickly link across Pegleg Pete, who says Bran has to go into a trance and can only use one power at a time. The Night King can multitask and can use several of his powers simultaneously without going into a trance. Bran has to get a lot better or he will lose. So yes, I agree. I think that what we are seeing is not a matter of two equals, one against the other. There might be equals in power, but in terms of understanding what they can do, they are not equals. They're certainly on the show, and on the show, I think that we have seen and will continue to see Bran taking up this role of providing the information, going back in time to understand what was really going on, and then being able to apply that to what's happening in the world around him. So that, I think, is his role. There will probably be a few little bits of some kind of psychic battle or something like that, a bit like we saw at the very end with the birds that Bran was doing some reconnaissance with, that kind of thing, some kind of extra level of wizardy combat going on. But I don't think there's going to be this one-on-one battle, because the Night King is fundamentally much more in control of his powers than Bran is. So I think that's a really valid point, Pete. So thank you for that. Fernzilla, $5. Thank you very much. Says, I think that George R.R. Martin will change anything in the books just to mess with D&D. Well, yeah, possibly, but I think that the books are such a different beast, and there are so many different characters. I was thinking of doing a possible series, which I may still do, incidentally, of going through the characters that are in the books but not on the show, and trying to just tease out why this is important and who might have been taking over some of their plot lines and things like that. But when you think about the huge plot lines that are going on, we've got all of the stuff going on in Dawn that is completely not in the show. That there's that's going to be really big in the Winds of Winter. All of the Dawnish plotting. We've got Aegon, who has launched an invasion. That is an entirely new thing that is going on. We've got people like Lady Stoneheart. We've got people like Mance and Stannis, who are alive in the books that aren't there. We've got huge storylines to do with Sansa, it's going to be different to what happened on the show. So I think that the differences are so huge that it will end in roughly the same place, because it has to, because he's written so much of it already, and he is the kind of writer who foreshadows and things like that, and he said as much himself. He can't change where the ending's going to be. He wanted to, actually, when he started going onto Reddit and seeing people had guessed some stuff that was going to happen, and he thought, oh no, I'll change that, but then he realized he couldn't actually change because he'd structured it so tightly that it would suddenly appear very jarring. When we get to the end, we should be at the point of going, yes, of course, I understand why that happened. I can see the thread of this happening. I can see that character arc. I can see where you foreshadowed that. So that's what he's building. Is he going to change anything just to mess with D&D? I don't think so. I think in his mind they're now different. He's got, and I don't know whether he's actually said it or somebody was attributed it to him, but it's like fan fiction now, but with the benefit of it, them knowing where the story is going to go. So it's different to what the books actually are. So yeah, I think, but I still like both. Order of the Green Hand I just happened to spot. Order of the Green Hand is in the chat. Good to see you guys. Let's just Maura try this again. $25. Thank you. That's very kind. I assume that was the one that got retracted earlier. So thank you for that super chat. That's very kind. Enjoying the Well-Told Tale and Frankenstein. Good. I'm really pleased. I'm loving reading Frankenstein, incidentally, over on the Well-Told Tale, because although I knew the story, what I'd forgotten was the absolute depth of language that Mary Shelley used and utilized in that story. It's astonishingly deep and well written, and it's a delight for me to read. So I'm glad you're enjoying it as well. It's a wonderful story, and it's so much more than the monster story that we have. This is a story of creation and of identity and anguish and hatred, and what is it when you're trying to create a person's character? What is that, and what really drives them? So it's really quite deep themes that are going on in the story, and it's astonishingly well written. I still can't believe she was 18 when she wrote it. Absolute genius. So I'm glad you're enjoying them. Thank you again, Maura. That's really kind. Mazamonti, £5. Thank you very much. George R. R. Martin has said that the wall won't fall in the same way in his book. Any thoughts as to how it might fall? I hadn't actually caught that he'd said it's not going to fall in the same way. I think in terms of how it might fall, I think that it's more to do with magic. I think that the idea that you just get a dragon who burns it down doesn't quite work for me. The point of the wall is not that it is a wall. That's not what's going on. It didn't start as high as it is now. It actually started at like normal wall height, and then it's just each generation added a little bit extra, and all the rest of it. So that's what turned it into this massive thing we've got nowadays. What's actually the barrier is the magical wards that are placed within its foundations that prevent the others. We don't know all the details of this, obviously, because this was done a long time ago, but the thinking is that it prevents the others from crossing south. So in terms of how the wall will fall, I think that it's probably more to do with how those wards are broken, and that has to be done magically. And for me, I do wonder whether it is going to be the connection, having talked about the connection between Bran and the Night King a moment ago. In the books, I think that connection is going to be a lot stronger, and I do still wonder whether Bran heading down south of the wall again is going to offer an opportunity for the others to be coming down as well. So that's my overall thought there. I'd not come across that quote from George R. R. Martin. That's really interesting. Thank you. Karina Brown, 5, is that Australian dollars? Quite possibly, in which case, good morning. Do you think the Night King is coming to stop J and D's baby from being born? Amazing show, by the way. Thank you so much. Is the Night King coming to stop Jon and Daenerys's baby from being born? This connects in with a few of the other questions I got from, where was it? And it might be my patrons or somewhere else. I'll pick up on them as we go through in terms of what the Night King is wanting. I don't think that that's the driver here. We have to remember that the Night King, the others, started moving probably about 40 years ago. This was when they started gathering the babies from Craster. We don't know exactly when, but that's roughly the order of things. So if we've got that, then that's when they were starting to do stuff. Now, they even in the first book, we start getting sightings of them, which seems to imply that they're on the move, because before they had passed into legend, the idea that they even existed was laughable to very sensible characters, grounded characters like Tyrion, for example. And so that was still well before Jon, and in the books, incidentally, Jon still hasn't met Daenerys, but it's well before the two of those characters ever came close. So no, even though I think the Night King could perhaps look into the future and see these kinds of things, I don't think that is the driver. I think it's a much more sort of base instinct of them coming back to attain justice. In the books, I think that will come out a lot more. I think that we're not going to have a big battle as being the end part of all of this. I think this is very much going to be very much more the way you solve this conflict is not by just killing lots of people. It's going to be a lot more negotiated, which doesn't sound very exciting, but I think that it will be. I think that it's going to be quite a tense moment rather than just a big battle and trying to figure out how you kill the big baddie. I think that's me caught up on super chat, so I'm just which point another super chat appears. Thank you so much, Brian Price, $10. That's very kind. Regarding the Night King, as we're on the subject, I will go on to the Night King questions from my patrons in a moment as well. But Brian's saying regarding the Night King, Brian, of course, actually is a patron, but a super chat as well. Thank you very much. I've seen theories that he will be killed, that the heroes will make peace with him, that Bran will go in the past, or even that he might be healed. Do you like any of these? So, yes, I do. I think that... well, I'll be honest with you guys. The one bit of this story that I always find the hardest to, I feel, talk confidently on is to do with the White Walkers and the others. And I don't think that's through lack of me investigating it. I think it's deliberately because George R.R. Martin has not told us all of the things that are going on there. In the books, he has not told us anything about their beginning. On the show, we've seen just a little snippet of it and a hint. So on the basis of that, what we seem to have is somebody who quite rightly could have some kind of a grudge or a vengeance or something that needs to be put right, because let's face it, what happened was a human being was tied to a tree and then had something shoved into his heart that turned him into one of the others, a White Walker, who probably then meant that he could never again see his friends and family, and all his old life had to go, and everybody just despised him for what he was. He, in many ways, he actually, I've not thought about this before, but does echo this kind of Frankenstein's monster idea. So I think that that is the sort of the background feeling that we've got. So in terms of being killed, I can understand that, but I do not think that this is going to be in a big battle. It might be on the show. They're going to make it a lot simpler on the show. But in terms of a big battle solving everything, the heroes will make peace with him. There's a communication issue there that we need to deal with. I think that is going to be quite hard. The Bran will go into the past. I don't really like the Bran time traveling thing to solve everything. It just seems a little bit contrived to me, or that he might be healed. I do like that last one quite a bit, I have to say, in terms of can they take out the bit of dragonglass? Might that work? I think that is something that does appeal to me. When we always have to come back to a quote that George R.R. Martin loves. He didn't come up with it originally, but it's the idea that everyone is a hero in their own story. The White Walkers do not think that they're the baddies in this story. The White Walkers will think that they are on the side of truth and justice. They will think that there's good reason for them doing what they're doing. And for me, that has to be to do with their history with the children of the forest. Not humans, but the children of the forest. They're not there. Yes, they were built to fight the humans, but they were built by the children of the forest to do it. And I think it is them that the White Walkers are really focused on. And that means heading to the Isle of Faces, not the places like Winterfell or King's Landing or wherever that they will probably end up in the show. So I hope that one answers that for you. We've got House Kraken Tacos. Thank you very much. I will pick up at that one just one moment. I just wanted to quickly finish off this last bit about the Night King. So Leslie Galen, this was on Twitter, I think, saying, what does the Night King want? I think I've covered that one already. Lost Imagination asked, do you think that the Night King is tasked with cleansing all the non-indigenous and murderers from Westeros? Did the children put in place a way to ensure that bad humans do not overrun the place? No, I think that they were created as a weapon against humanity. I think that the clues are there in terms of what they are good at. They are stronger than humans. They are resistant to the weapons that humans use. And they can use humans' numbers against them by whenever they kill a human, they can raise that human and make it on their side. And on the flip of that, they are vulnerable to the things that the children of the forest use to fight with dragonglass. So I think that it's very clear that they were created to be on the side of the children of the forest to fight humans. But I think it was to fight all humans, because when they were created, the children of the forest felt that humanity as a whole was going to destroy them. So that's what I think is going on there. I think those are the last few ones on the Night King. Yeah. So House Kraken Tacos, thank you for your super chat. Would you say something about why everyone is so sure Aegon is a fake? So this is a book question. This is about the character who is claims to be Aegon, the eldest child of Rhaegar. One moment. So the story we are given effectively by this plan by Illyrio and Varys, and we've got John Connington, who's there, who was a great Targaryen loyalist, and all of that lot. The story that comes up from that is that Aegon was he was saved by Varys and whisked away and raised to be this perfect king. so that when he came to full age, then he could come back in to Westeros and reclaim it for the Targaryens, and that was what was going on. And when I say the perfect king, he was surrounded by all these advisors and people who could teach him and train him about the ways of being a king. And also, he was not brought up in great finery, so he understood, like Aegon V, incidentally, he understood what normal people's lives were like, so he wasn't being aloof and all the rest of it. So that's the story we're given. It seems a little bit tenuous because there is no clue anywhere else that that baby was saved, but we could go with it for a bit. The reason why lots of people think that it's a fake is not that he's not got Targaryen blood in him. I and most people think that he's actually a Blackfire. This is because Illyrio does an offhand comment about what does it matter what color a dragon is, red or black, red being the Targaryens, black being the Blackfires, which seems to imply that it doesn't actually matter who this whether it's a Blackfire or Targaryen, as long as it's a good king, it doesn't really matter. Added to which, he's connected to the Golden Company. The Golden Company are going with him. The Golden Company are, of course, the exiles from the Blackfire rebellions originally. That's what they were. They went over there. They were founded by Aegor Rivers, who had the family sword, Blackfire, the sword. And there's a bit that George R.R. Martin wrote and read out in a draft chapter, and then didn't include that bit in the final. I think it was in A Dance with Dragons in the final version, when Illyrio is talking about wanting to talk to Aegon about a sword, which seems to imply he wants to give him Blackfire. So again, these hints after hints, and then finally coming from the other way around, from Daenerys's perspective, she has visions of the Mummer's dragon, and this is from the House of the Undying, and the idea here, and this is under one of these kind of things about a lie that she has to be revealing, and the implication is that she will show that this is actually not who he says it is. So there's lots of hints. We're in one of these situations where there's no definitive bit of proof that says that this is not actually Aegon. But there are lots of hints that when you add them all up, they kind of weigh quite heavily. Added to which, it's quite an odd thing for if this really is the true king, or somebody who is more in line than Dany, then to actually have this person, and indeed in Jon, ahead of Jon, to have this person suddenly appear quite near the end of this story is a little bit weird, just sort of magically appearing. So there's a lot there. There's no one thing that makes us be absolutely sure it isn't, but in terms of the story, it does seem quite likely that this is a fake, or at least this is a Blackfire who probably would turn into quite a good king because had been trained up for it, but is not who they say they are, whether they know it or not. Matthew Witham saying, thank you for the entertainment, keep it up. You're more than welcome. Keep it up for as long as my voice is going to hold out. Let's quickly get on to, I had a couple of really good questions on Twitter that I just want to get into. Although actually, first of all, another one from my patron before I finish up there. Merit of Abydos In the Night Watch Oath, the phrase "I'm the Watcher on the walls" is mentioned. I often wonder what that refers to. Now, this is a really interesting one. If you go through the Night's Watch Oath, I did the live stream a few weeks ago with the Disputed Lands, Crowfeed's daughter, when we went through it. I can't remember whether we went into this, but one of the lines of it says, "I am the Watcher on the walls." Now, you would expect that this would mean this would actually be the Watcher on the wall, because that's what the Night's Watch are, aren't they? The people who stand on the wall and watch. But this talks about the walls, and so some people have speculated that perhaps this is that there's more than one wall, that there might have been another one somewhere else. I think that this is actually something that I referred to a moment ago, back to the idea that this oath came originally from a long time ago. So this is way back before what we now think of as being what the Night's Watch do, stand on top of a wall and look out. The wall was a lot lower, and the castles that they were in were proper castles. Now they haven't got walls to the south. This is because of what happened with the Night's King. They learnt the lesson, so they made sure that nobody, the Night's Watch, could not hold themselves up in a castle anymore, because it wouldn't be protected from the south. So there are walls all the way around it. So I think that is where that is coming from. I think it's also just poetic, just saying the Watcher on the walls, just somebody on the walls of a city. That you would be the person who watches out for danger coming. So I think it's sort of poetic, and I think it's talking about that, and referring back to the original time, what it was like for the Night's Watch, rather than implying that there's a second wall somewhere. So I hope that one makes sense. On Facebook, Shelley, Reese O says, "I missed a super chat from Brennan Barnes. Please give us your take on the significance of the 5 forts. Apologies for that. I don't know where that question was, but I will talk about the 5 forts. I'm just having a quick flick through to see whether I can see the super chat. If not, I will just answer the question. Okay, so in terms of the 5 forts, so people, if you don't know the 5 forts, right over on the far side of Essos, you get these 5 ancient forts that are sort of in a row, that are there, and they're said, and I wish I could remember the exact enemy name that they're supposed to be protecting against, but the implication is that this is against the White Walkers. This idea of this being another defense against the White Walkers. Ben Tovey saying, "Wish I could get my £5 super chat back that was ignored." I'm sorry if I missed another one. Ben, if you want to ask the question again, I will keep an eye out for that, and I will answer it now. But in terms of the and this, incidentally, guys, this is why I need somebody else on the live stream with me, because it's trying to read the chat as well as talking is clearly beyond my limited capabilities. So apologies, Ben. I think that this is an indication that the White Walkers could well have come into the realms of humanity from the other side as well, not just from the north and Westeros. There are stories all the way over to Westeros, over into Essos about this, and that seems to imply that this was a whole world cataclysmic event. So not just a thing that happened in Westeros. So I think that's what it is, but I think that they're actually probably far older than that. I think that these are quite not just Age of Heroes, but Dawn Age structures. So that was what was going on. Is Ben Tovey? I'm slightly lost as to whether you did do a super chat or not. But apologies for that if I did miss that one. So that's what I think the 5 forts are about. They are connected to this legend that was over in Essos of the White Walkers of the Long Night, but I think actually they probably predate that as well. A question from Facebook from Shelley Sawfleet. Do you think Brienne will survive Lady Stoneheart in the Winds of Winter? And if so, how will she kill Jaime? So this is a question about in the books what's happening. So in the books, Brienne, when she's doing her interminably long wandering around the Riverlands, she gets caught by Lady Stoneheart, and she Lady Stoneheart basically thinks she must be working for the Lannisters because she's got a Lannister sword, and while she's in a sort of a fever, she calls out Jaime's name. So obviously it all adds up. And then Lady Stoneheart and her lackeys basically say that she has to choose whether she's going to get Jaime or she's going to be hung, because that's what Lady Stoneheart does. She hangs people. Misty 306, I have got your question coming up in just a few minutes, hopefully. So in terms of how she survives, she's given the choice of, does she want sword, go after Jaime, or noose to die? And we last see her there with the noose being put around her neck, and then she calls out a word, and the implication is that she refuses until that point to give up Jaime, but then she finally shouts out sword, that she's going to go and get Jaime. And then in a Dance with Dragons, she does go and find Jaime. So I think that she survives by saying that she's going to go and get Jaime, and she does go to get Jaime. I think, though, she's not going to kill him for obvious reasons, because I think that Jaime's story's got a lot longer to go. I think that she might bring him back to Lady Stoneheart, though, because she's a woman of her honor. And so I think that might happen. And then we're going to get this, and I really can't, if this does happen, I'm really looking forward to reading it, because you got this amazing time before when you had Catelyn Stark and you had Brienne and you had Jaime, and they were all together way back in time when Jaime had been captured, and then Catelyn Stark sends Jaime off in Brienne's care to go down to King's Landing because she wants to get her children back. So they will have this reunion of the three of them, which would be amazing to see. And it's a matter of whether Jaime would be able to convince her that he is able to somehow protect her children or bring them back in some way. So I think that is where I think the story is going. I think it's going to be fascinating seeing that one. So Misty 306, I said your question is coming up, and yeah, Pod's going to live. I think that the reason, incidentally, that I didn't say, I think Brienne finally agreed to go after Jaime was to save Pod, because she saw that Pod was going to be hung as well. So, and I think that's what she was doing. Misty 306, your question was, what is Jon Snow's given name, Jaehaerys or Aemon? Now, this is obviously a book question, because on the show we've been told that his name is Aegon. Now, I have increasingly come round to the idea, and I should probably just say, do check out Misty's blog if you enjoy reading Game of Thrones stuff. It's called Aqua Venatus. I think probably mispronounced that, but apologies. Maybe Chrissy or someone else or Misty could put a link up there in the chat. But it's a really good blog, so please do check it out. As I've been going through. And I promise you I'll come round to answer this question in a moment, but as I've been working my way through what I think has been happening in Robert's Rebellion and the like, I've been increasingly trying to get into the mindset of the people at that time. And so we've got Rhaegar and Lyanna, and when we know that Rhaegar was set upon having this third head of the dragon. He wanted another child, and he seemed to be naming his children after the three original Targaryens. And he got Aegon, and he got Rhaenys, and so the next one was going to be Visenya. That seems to be what he was set in his mind. And so when we get the fact that Lyanna is pregnant and Rhaegar is there, he will be saying, this is a baby girl, and her name is going to be Visenya, because he believes in prophecy. And Rhaegar was absolutely obsessed with prophecy. Now, he got it wrong, of course, because it wasn't a baby girl. But Rhaegar got a lot of stuff wrong. He got a lot of prophecy wrong. He thought he was the prince that was promised, and then changed his mind and thought that Aegon was the prince that was promised, and then Aegon got killed, and so he thought that he was going to have 3 children, 2 girls, 1 boy, and he didn't. So he got lots of stuff wrong, Rhaegar. So he was absolutely convinced about following prophecy. So I think that when he left, because he left while Lyanna was pregnant, well before the birth, when he left, he would probably have said, and that baby is going to be called Visenya. And then he headed off. Then we get the fact that he dies. He dies in the Battle of the Trident. And roughly around that time, give or take a couple of weeks, then we've got the birth of baby John. And so we're suddenly left with a fact that the baby is born as a baby boy. And so Lyanna can't name this what Rhaegar wanted. So she's going to be left with, what do I call this child? The news will have filtered through quite soon after that, I would have thought, via Starfall, probably as their main route. Not only did Rhaegar die, but also Aerys and also the other children had died as well. So basically she was there on her own, having to name this child. So she is not a Targaryen. She hasn't got all of this ancient history in her mind about Jaehaerys and Aemon and all the rest of it. She is just going to pick a Targaryen name that seems to work for her to honor in some way the Targaryens that died in that family, to honor them. And so for me, although I love the idea of Jaehaerys and that seems to fit his character really well, I don't think that she will immediately think of Jaehaerys. I think that Aegon actually does make sense, what they had on the show, because she will know that baby Aegon is dead, and this is just naming it after somebody who's been cruelly murdered. Actually, that makes sense to me. So Greet Weirwood, yes, she was an educated highborn lady. She did know the names, but in terms of what they meant to the Targaryens, then I think that she wasn't as well versed in that. So yes, she will have been aware of the names, but I think that overriding concern was to honor the people who had died. And Misty, yes, I think that baby Aegon was born and then died, and then another baby came along and then was named the same thing. I think that's the most likely there. I think it was down to her. The fundamental point for me is that the naming was done by Lyanna, not Rhaegar. And so we shouldn't be thinking about what Rhaegar would have wanted the child to be called. It will be thinking, what would Lyanna want the child to be called? And she will probably wanted a Targaryen name, but it's not, rather than a Stark name. But I don't think that it will have been all to do with this prophecy. It'll be more about honoring people. So that's my take on it. Personally, I think Jaehaerys would have been a better choice, but I wasn't there. Let's quickly go to some other questions on Twitter. Eddie Loveholm saying D&D talked about 3 holy cow moments. He didn't actually say holy cow, but I'm trying to make sure this video isn't demonetized. When they found out about when they got the major plot points for the story a few years ago. There was the burning of Shireen, Hold the Door, and one more for the very ending. Any guess on what that last moment might be? I think that this is going to be tied in with the final betrayal of Dany. I think that the vision she gets at the House of the Undying, they are going to be. We'll see she'll be betrayed again for love, and I think that is what is going to be happening, and that is what is here. So I think Dany, I don't think is going to survive this. I think Dany is going to die, and I think that she's going to be betrayed, and I think that is what the last holy cow moment was. Adadel, does a person who has been resurrected by receiving the last kiss pass the flame of life to anyone they decide to, who's dead, obviously, or the resurrection of that person is decided by some other major forces? This is getting into the deep weeds of how does magic work in the world of Ice and Fire. My take on this is that the magic seems to be coming from roughly the same kind of place. I don't hold to the idea that the last kiss, this is an all-powerful god, the Lord of Light, who is deciding benevolently to be bringing some people back or not others or anything like that. I think it seems to be happening in Westeros because of the increase in magic that happened after the comet and after the dragons came back, and I think that has provided the extra impetus to it, rather than it being this the red god doing anything here. So in terms of, does a person who is being resurrected by receiving the last kiss pass the flame of life to anyone they decide to, or is it decided by some other forces? The only example that we have in this is Beric, obviously, who was brought back by Thoros 6 times, in fact, and then used the last kiss to bring back Lady Stoneheart, and he seemed to choose that. It seems to be more about him doing the magic, the choosing, than anything else. But that's just one example. We can't really draw any great conclusions from this. But I think that I would strongly say that this isn't just, as I said, it's not just about the red god doing stuff. The imagery we've got all the way around that whole thing is a connection of fire magic and weirwood magic. You get Beric, when we first see him, is sat in a, described as being in a weirwood throne. He's very much like the description we get of Bloodraven, in fact, with his one eye, sitting in a cave underground with the weirwood roots around him. That's very much there. And then when you think about Lady Stoneheart, she was brought back, yes, by fire magic, but the only reason why she was found was because, and we saw this through Arya's warging into Nymeria. Nymeria dragged the body out of the water and left it somewhere where it could be found by people who could do that. So it is a meshing of these two types of magic. It's not just a one or the other. let's have a quick flick through. What other questions did I have here? Sir Fifth Horsebane, why did the Manderleys take a Merling as their sigil? Good question. I don't know if there's a specific story there. If there is, again, guys, please drop it in the chat. But we have to remember that they weren't Northerners, the Manderleys. They came from the Riverlands. They got booted out effectively from the Riverlands, and the Starks gave them a home, and they said you can look after the port, the great port in the north, White Harbour. And it's not just a port; it's strategically important. This is the big route that that carries people up into the north, up the White Knife River. This is incredibly strategically important. And I think the Manderleys, we're told that they have always been fiercely loyal to the Starks, because they should have just been chucked out and had no home, but they were given a home by the Starks. And so I think that what they wanted to do, although they maintained their own identity by bringing their own religion up and the like, I think that they were wanting to show their new identity was about being on a port, not being just in the Riverlands, and being on the sea. And I think that choosing a Merling is showing that they are taking on a new identity in the north as the people who are there on the coast. So I think that's there. There might be another a legend associated with it as well. I'm not sure. Couple of super chats very quickly. PZP saying, do you think Winds of Winter is done yet? I think it's nearly done. I really do. I think my reading of the runes is that it will be released in November of next year. That's where I'm at. I've come to that conclusion through working through of the fact that I think that he was wanting it after the season had finished, because I think that he just wants his own things there. I think that the publishers will want it to be coming out in November. This is going to be the biggest publishing thing of the decade, probably, because we've been waiting for this for so long. It'll be like when the last Harry Potter books came out and people were queuing. This is going to be huge. And they will want to time it for just before Christmas, which is when the most people will be doing it, so that November works there. Added to which, he said once a couple of years ago that he was cutting back on his going to different conventions until he'd finished writing it. And he's just started booking himself in for more conventions coming up next year, which seems to imply that he thinks he's going to be done with it by about then. So that's my guess. I don't think he's finally done it all yet. I don't think it's all completely finished. I think he was focusing on Fire and Blood, but that realistically was finished several months ago. And so I think that he's not doing any more of Dunk and Egg until he's done the Winds of Winter. So I think this is probably soon, but don't hold me to it. I'm always too optimistic with this. Sheeny Donut, thank you again. Show Melisandre and Volantis equals Golden Company. So the Golden Company, I'm not entirely sure what point you're making there. The Golden Company on the show, I do not think are have got all of the background on history. Yes, they might name check it, but they're just there as a new army for Cersei. I think that's what they're going to be doing. I think Melisandre will return back from Volantis, and I hope she comes back with some people from some other followers, because at the moment, well, to take one step back, in the worshippers of the Red God, the followers of the Lord of Light, this is an apocalyptic religion that they've got. They fundamentally believe that it is their god against another god, and there's going to be a huge battle between them. This is the big thing that they've got there, and in the books, it's very clear that Tyrion wanders through Volantis and past the great temple there, and he describes the atmosphere as being this kind of febrile atmosphere that was just like before a riot in King's Landing. They're working up, the Red Priests are working up the people into this great mass frenzy, and they have identified Daenerys as being the Azor Ahai reborn. So there's all of that going on there, and they're wanting to get Daenerys over to go and do what she has to do. And I think that in the books, that's going to be a massive thing. We've already seen Mokoro, who's been sent over there to go to be with Dany. I think on the show, I hope they don't ignore all of that. We've seen a few of the other Red Priests around who seem to be doing the same kind of things, so I'm hoping that they do come across, some of these do come across to Westeros. It'd be a big shame if they miss out all of that. So Nymeria 73, just following up from the question about the last kiss. I wasn't thinking about the Red God in particular, but any kind of force. My point is that if Beric can do it just randomly, then it's simply a plot device, kind of lame. No, I don't think it makes it a plot device. I think that he decided that. So show Beric in terms of character is very different to book Beric. Book Beric, he lost all the joy of life. He had it sucked out of him by these repeated being brought back. He'd forgotten the love of his life. He said that he knew that there was somebody he'd loved, but he couldn't remember anymore. He couldn't enjoy the taste of things. He didn't. There was nothing that would bring him any joy. So he wanted to end it. And he saw somebody who could perhaps, he was commissioned by Ned Stark to go off and fight the good fight in the Riverlands, and now he's found Ned Stark's wife. He can bring her back. That, to me, makes a lot of sense for his character to be doing that. He doesn't want to be hanging around anymore himself, and he sees Ned Stark's wife and thinks, well, I can bring her back. He doesn't know what she's going to turn into. He doesn't know she's going to be like Lady Stoneheart. He probably thinks that he can bring back Ned Stark's wife, who can then be looking for the Stark children and trying to restore order. So it makes sense. It's not just a plot device in my view. Vanessa C. Amnesty S. Do you think Lyanna has the Sansa original storyline? I mean, is she the one who betrayed the Starks because she didn't come out when his father and brother were murdered? She stayed with Rhaegar. My take on this, I did a video about it as part of my series on what I think was going on in Robert's Rebellion. The timing here is crucial. Brian Price, sorry, I will come back to that in just a moment. Brian Price saying, I missed his super chat. It's a couple back. I do apologize. Thank you for that super chat. And I will quickly flick back and try and find your other one. I can't find another one. I do apologize for that. It's off the top of my thing. You guys are chatting far too much. They're just the things are disappearing off the top too quickly. Brian, if you drop the question back down into the chat now, I will pick up on it and answer it straight away. Order of the Green Hand, great to see you, and nice. I'm glad you had a good time in the chat alone as well. So while you do that, Brian, I will just quickly pick up on this question I was just starting on about Lyanna. Now, I did a video about this a while ago in terms of the timings. we have to remember that communication was very different in that time. So in terms of getting messages and understanding what was going on in the wider world, that's a lot harder. So if we take as an assumption that we get Rhaegar and Lyanna, they're heading off, they're going off grid, they're not going down the main roads, they're not stopping off at any big towns and cities. We certainly don't have any reports of them going off and doing any of that. Then what that means is that they're going the slow route wherever they're going to. And the place we know that they end up is the Tower of Joy. I don't think that they necessarily went straight there, but that is generously maybe 6 weeks travel. So I think we need to remember that for about 6 weeks after they met up, they're off grid. They're not getting any information about what's happening until, say, they get to the Tower of Joy, at which point they will probably get told what's going on from House Dane down at Starfall. This seems to be one of the reasons why they went down there, because that was a friendly place to go to, because Arthur Dane was obviously with them, and Ashara Dane was closely linked across to, she was one of the ladies in waiting for Elia, Rhaegar's wife. So that was going on there. So we've got this 6 week period when they're probably relatively incommunicado, not 100% sure on what's happening in the rest of the world before they catch up. If we assume, and I think it's a reasonable assumption, if we assume that that Brandon hears about Rhaegar and Lyanna relatively soon after they both head off, within a few days, say, and I think that's a reasonable assumption given the timelines that we've got. If we assume that, then we have to say, okay, so what happened next was Brandon, we're told that he went from there down to King's Landing in just 2 weeks. So 2 weeks, he goes down there with his friends and gets locked up, at which point almost immediately Aerys then says, right, now the fathers of these people have to come here as well, and he sends out a demand for them. Looking at where those people were, then it was about 4 weeks for all of those fathers to get there. Incidentally, one of the people, Ethan Glover, was one of the friends there. His father, it appears, didn't turn up, which seems to imply that they didn't wait for somebody to come all the way down from Deepwood Mott. That would have taken months. But yes, so 4 weeks or so for all of these other guys who were just in the Vale and in the Riverlands to get there, as well as Rickard Stark, who was already traveling down south in order to go to what he thought was going to be Brandon's wedding. So then we had, after that period of time, then immediately there was the murders, the killing of Brandon and Rickard, and the sending out of the demand to Jon Arryn for Robert and Ned to be sent to King's Landing, and a rejection of that. So that period actually happened quite quickly. The descent from Brandon hearing about what was going on, or hearing the lie about what was going on, and effectively the declaration of war, happened over a period of only about 6 weeks, maybe a little bit more. And in that period of time, we already know that was when Rhaegar and Lyanna were traveling. So I think it is entirely likely that they did not know all that was happening. They weren't stopping off getting updates from ravens. They would have to go places with maesters in order to do that. They probably were completely oblivious to it, and they only found out what was going on when it was too late to stop it. So I think that this is, it's a good rule of thumb with George R. R. Martin, I think, to just to say what is the most agonizing thing that could happen to a character. That might well be what has happened here. It would be truly agonizing for Lyanna and Rhaegar to only realize the full implications of what has happened after it's too late to stop it. So I think that's what's going on there. I don't think that she betrayed the Starks in any way, because she didn't come out and try and stop it. The war was by that point well underway. No, I don't think it's the same. And I think I defend Sansa quite a lot on here. I think that to say that she betrayed the Starks is probably slightly harsh, given the fact that the situation she was on as a young girl who was being heavily influenced by the Lannisters, leaned on by them. I think we should go easy on her. Brian Price, what is the significance of Sotheros to the story? I think I did answer that one, actually. I apologize if I didn't give it enough time. I don't think it's going to have a huge impact on the story, is the answer. I think that we will get a few mentions of it in terms of Victarion lost some of his fleet on his way across over to Slaver's Bay. He lost some of his fleet going there, but I don't think we're going to see any main characters go to Sotheros. I don't think we're going to see any main characters appear coming out of there. I think it's just going to be one of these, like the area off to the east with Ashai and all the rest of it. We're aware of it. It adds to the greater understanding of this planet and what's going on, but I don't think it's going to play a major part in the story. So that's my view. I hope that one's quite clear. Guys, I think I'm starting to wind up now. I've got one more question that I spotted right at the beginning when I was just quickly checking in to the chat before we even started, but I thought it was a really interesting question. Sir Cohid said, if you could drop anywhere in the world of Ice and Fire where we currently are in the books, where would you drop and what would you do? So, guys, I'm going to answer that one, then I'm going to pick out one or two more from the chat. So if you've got any burning questions, now is the time for you to drop them in there. But in terms of where I would go in the books right now, it's Braavos. I want to go to Braavos. I love Braavos. It would be absolutely fascinating seeing what's going on. I talked about it a bit earlier in the live stream. In fact, I think it'd be fascinating to see what's going on there. And the other place would be Meereen, because in Meereen, in the books, everything is about to kick off. We've got so much going on there. We've got Victarions just arrived. We've got Tyrion and Ser Jorah have sitting in a tent outside it. We've got Barristan Selmy, who's leading the defense of it. We've got plague going on. We've got an invading army coming out from outside trying to get it. We've got insurrection and revolt within the city itself. We've got Moqorro arriving. We've got Quentin, all the stuff that was going on with Quentin there. There's so much story just packed into what's happening in Meereen. Incidentally, this is those who have been in the community a while will remember the Meereenese knot, which was what George R.R. Martin was talking about in terms of why he was so slow writing the last book, not this book. The last book was because he got himself into a real conundrum about the order in which all these different people were going to be arriving at Meereen and how this impacted on Dany and her character development. And he had to keep on shuffling the characters around in the order that they arrive. But now, finally, we've got all these characters descending in on Meereen, and there's so much going on there that it'll be fascinating to see what happens. And then obviously Dany is going to come back, probably very similarly to on the show, I would imagine, with Drogon and with the Dothraki, and I think that'll be astonishing seeing all of that happen. So guys, I'm just going to randomly pick a couple of things. Megan V saying bye. Good evening to you. We've got questions from House Kraken Tacos and Nymeria 73 about relative ages of Jon and Dany. So, John, we do have an answer on this one, in that George R. R. Martin has confirmed that John is 8 or 9 months older than Dany. So she was conceived at around before the sack of King's Landing, but she was conceived just after the burning of the penultimate hand of the king by Aerys, and so she was then born effectively 8 or 9 months after the end of the war, after the sack of King's Landing, and John was born at around that time. So John is nearly a year older than Dany, if that makes sense. And I will have one more question that I shall just quickly try and flick through. Done about Dany and John. Miss Cherim, let's end with this one. I don't know whether it's really a question or a comment, saying, I have a feeling that there is no prophecy and that all of them will do things in order to be Azor Ahai, but in the end it won't be anyone. My long-held belief with Azor Ahai is that this is after the show is finished, after the books have finished, we will still be debating who Azor Ahai was, if anyone. I think that we're going to have a number of candidates. I think we're going to have a number of symbolic candidates. I think that there'll be lots of people who'll be able to say and point at this person was, or that person was, or maybe it was lots of different people. The question, or the issue here, is not actually us identifying who Azor Ahai is. I think the issue is us understanding the power of belief, the power of thinking something is true and following through with that. So actually, what matters less is whether Melisandre is right about who she believes Azor Ahai is. What matters more is what she does about it. She drives so much of the action because of her fundamental belief that that Stannis is the Azor Ahai reborn, and that is the important thing, not actually trying to pick who it might be, because that is the thing that the characters do. I think it's for us to understand the impact of that on real people and the story. So guys, I think I am going to end up there. Thank you so much. There was a very quick super chat. Carrie Nevers, could you answer Jenny's question? Oh yes, I would love to. Let me have a quick flick back and see. Is this Jenny of Coldstone? I will assume it is. Do you think the others were using blood magic when they made their symbols on the show? I think this is a really interesting question. I can see why you were wanting it answered. And just incidentally, I say this every time somebody does this. Thank you particularly to Carrie. I love it when people do super chats on behalf of other questions, because it's very easy to miss them. And thank you so much. That's very generous. Whether they were doing blood magic in terms of making the symbols, I think, if I'm understanding your question correctly, it's like when they're making the symbols out of dead bodies of things. Is that blood magic? Well, in a way, yes. I think that they are magical creatures, and I think that what they do is magical, but I think fundamentally they're not casting a spell, as it were, by what they're doing. I think that they are trying to send a message. This is very much a show thing in terms of then sending a message, a visual message, pardon me, that is linked to the children of the forest with that symbol, the spiral symbol. The place where they were first created, that was where the first White Walker, where the Night King was created. And that, I think, is the biggest clue we've got about what they want and why, because this is the only way really that they've been communicating to humans, is by leaving symbols for them. And this is them saying, this is what we think is important, this is why we're here. And I think it's to be going after, as I said earlier in the live stream, it's not about killing all the humans. That's just a means to an end. It's about getting back to the children of the forest. Is it blood magic? Sort of, because what they do is magical, and they will raise the bodies as well, and that is, and all magic in this world involves sacrifice and blood in some way, but it's mostly just putting a symbol and a bit of communication there to humans about what they're really about. That's my take anyway. But guys, I'm just going to quickly flick and make sure I haven't missed another super chat. I haven't, so thank you everyone. Thank you for all the super chats. That was very kind. Some fantastic questions in there. Thank you to my patrons. If you are interested in becoming a patron, please do check out the link down in the description. So it's the best way to support this channel and get access to some other material that I produce just for patrons over there. And guys, do please keep an eye out for my other videos as they come up. We'll be back here same time next week. I don't know who I'm going to have as a guest, but I'm desperately going to try and get a guest on for next time. But guys, thank you so much. Take care, and I'll see you again soon.